Over the past few months, we've had the pleasure of having hundreds of producers join our mastering contests, and along the way, we've identified the consistent issues that hold people back from achieving a great sounding master. For each contest, we create an in-depth feedback video that goes over the results, highlighting what worked well for some and where others missed the mark. The latest contest provided an excellent example, revealing the common issues that cause producers to stumble during mastering. It's been incredibly fulfilling to witness how entrants are genuinely improving month after month. We're delighted that this process is proving to be really helpful for people. I'm excited to share this knowledge with you today, so you can avoid these common issues and make significant improvements in your own mastering journey. Enjoy. Hello, and thank you, contestants, for entering the mastering contest. I'm Tom Frampton from Mastering the Mix, and we're going to go over some of the entries, and we're going to look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and see what we can learn from the process. So to begin with, let's start off by looking at the different colours. So we've got people that have their names in green are those that adhered to the specifications regarding loudness and decibels true peak. So in the instructions, I said, make sure that the short-term LUFS loudness max is between -8 and -9. So you have to, there's only 1 decibel there, so you have to get that really bang on the money. And also keep the true peaks below 0. So everyone in green are those that adhered to the specification, and those that are in red are those that didn't. So that's something to think about for next time. One way that you can analyze this is opening our application Exposed To, and you can find the tracks you want to load up, and Exposed To will analyze the technical details, and you'll see the short-term LUFS loudness here and the decibels true peak here. So you want that figure to be between -8 and -9 for this particular track. In previous months, it's been between -6, -7, and in future months, it might be something else. So pay attention to that. It's always very important to get that right, as that kind of, it doesn't completely stop your ability to climb up the ranks, but it is important if you're mastering for an artist or a label or whoever. You want to be able to have authority and control over the loudness and the peak of your audio. And that can be done as well with limiting, and I'll go over that later. I'll master the track myself and show you my suggested approach, and hopefully that will help you in the future as well. So we're going to just listen to a few of these masters and hear some of the differences. Of course, there were 83 different masters, and everyone approached it differently. There are no two the same, so it's really fascinating. So let's have a quick listen through, starting at the top and just going down. We can see that there are very different approaches to dynamics and to tonal balance, and there's an interesting approach here. And what it seems to have happened for some of the masters is some of them were overly bright. Let's see if we can find some overly bright masters. Okay, so we've got quite a bright master here, and if we compare it to the reference track, notice how reference is telling us that we need to cut the low end a little bit, just by a decibel, bit of a boost in the low mids, but we want to bring down the high end by 2 decibels here to match the reference track. Okay, so this is something that you guys can definitely be using in your masters. Referencing is so important, and once you level match it, you get a really nice, fair comparison between what's going on with your track and what's going on with the reference track. And then the level line here, I've just pressed Control to give it a freeze there. The level line shows you the EQ changes that you need to make to your track to get it to sound like the reference track. And it gives us this really nice little curve. It's, these minor changes can make all the difference. For some reference tracks, you can be between plus minus 3 decibels, and it can sound very comparable because of the differences in instrumentation and arrangement. For this particular reference track, it was possible to get very close. If we fire up, I've got the 3 winners in here. If we compare EQ is a very similar approach. The difference being this level line in reference shows you the exact EQ changes you need to make to get it sound like the reference track. Whereas if you go into Expose, what we're going to do is I'm going to load up the reference track. If I can find it here. There's the reference track. I'll load it into Expose here. And now select it. And now we're comparing these tracks, the tonal balance, to the reference track. Super helpful. Okay, so, and we can zoom in here, plus minus 5, so we can see exactly how close we're getting. The benefit as well of Expose is that we can do mid-side too. So that gives us another layer of insight. If I'll grab this master here. So what does this tell me? This tells me that this track is a little bit louder in the low end, a little bit of a dip here in the mids, and then very comparable here. And look, that's 1 decibel here and 1 decibel here. This is the range. So it's really a tiny little 1 decibel dip around 500-600 hertz. So very, very comparable. When you go on the stereo, which is the combination of mid and side, you can see just how flat it is. And if we compare that as well, I'll find it here, bring in the reference track. Come on. Now what I can do is I can loudness match these tracks, and I can jump between them so I can do the comparison and keep an eye on these various, well, you can see the reference track there because it is the track. The tonal balance is completely flat, so there are no differences in tonal balance between them, just as a little test. Okay, so let's go back here. We listen to these tracks and we hear them in comparison to the reference track, level matched. Now, what's interesting about some of these tracks, we looked at this one here, and it was a little bit bright. Now, why could that be? That was actually something that came up a lot amongst many of the masters, okay? There were lots of them that were too bright. Now, I have a theory, and my theory is this. The reference track is quite bright throughout. The hi-hats are playing all the way through. Whereas if you listen to the mix itself, it starts off with very light hi-hats, and then later on, the hi-hats come out. Okay, it's really important then, when you're mastering a track, especially comparing it to a reference track, that when you're working on a specific section, try to go for the richest part of the arrangement. So that's when the low frequencies are at their lowest, and the high frequencies are at their highest. That's what we're going for. So we're matching apples for apples, you know? It's taking the richest part of the reference track and comparing it to the richest part of the mix. Now, what happens if you don't do that? If you try to match this section to this, you're going to end up pushing the highs too much because there's not as much information going on here, right? So you're trying to bring up those hi-hats to this level, but when this next section kicks in, then it becomes too bright. And I think that's a very common problem that happened in a number of these tracks. So it actually turned out that this particular snippet was a great example to focus on here to highlight this potential issue. So we say it in all of our plugin manuals as well, because it's very important when it comes to testing the EQ comparison. The EQ comparison does this automatically. So it'll automatically find the sonically the richest sections of the tracks, and it will compare those two. So it's always a fair comparison. And again, in reference, you would have to do this yourself. So you'd have to loop the section of the audio, like I've done here, and also loop the section of the reference track. Super important. The same goes for when you're using mix room or bass room, which I'll get into in a bit more depth later. So there we go. The idea as well is to try and keep the trying to keep the dynamics nice and open and transparent, so you hear all of the transients just poking through the mix nicely. Let's compare let's compare one that's very open and dynamic, like the winner, again, and we'll try and find one that isn't as dynamic. So if we look at this one here, you can see it's been very compressed, and there's a lot of headroom as well. It's about 2 decibels of headroom here, and but it's very loud. So when you zoom in, you can see all the transients have been really, really squashed down. So you can see that visually in the waveform, whereas when you go here, you can see that the transients have a lot more space to breathe. You know, you're not getting that same squashed look. You're getting this nice difference between the top of the transients and the body of the music here. And this just makes it much less fatiguing to listen to. Something that you can kind of see as you go through the different waveforms where the more compressed ones are going to stand out. So there's that other one that's a bit more of a sausage compared to the kind of peaks and troughs that you see in others. Yeah, you can see there's another one here, a little bit overcompressed. Let's have a listen. Not so bad. When we compare it to one that's not been overcompressed and limited in a more transparent way, you can really feel the transients coming through. It feels natural. It's not fatiguing to listen to. Again, I'll go through a process of how to achieve that as well. So yeah, some really interesting things to look at there. So we've got tonal balance and compression. So those are the two kind of main issues that we stumbled across in this particular master. So let's have a look. This is the mix. This is how I would suggest approaching it. So we have the reference track. We have a listen to it. Now reference is going to bring down the reference track automatically. See, it's -7 decibels. So I can see here, we need a lot more low end, a little bit of a cut here in the mids, and a little bit of a boost there. So that's the main issue. So what am I going to start with? Now, I often like to start with actually trying to find some resonances before I even jump into any, before I jump into any EQ, I'll actually see if I can find some resonances. So let's do a little sweep around. Seems to be one there. Seems to be one there. So these are two resonances that I'm it's glitching because of my video software is going as well. They're two resonances that I'm trying to remove from the mix to get a cleaner sound. I'll do it before and after when the volume's a bit louder later, so you can really hear the difference. But that's going to really help with the with minimizing the fatigue. So what's next? Let's actually bring up the level. So we're shooting for, what did I say, between -8 and -9 short-term LUFS and just below 0 decibels true peak. So I'll fire up limiter, I'll click analyze, and make note that I'm actually using the richest sonic area of the track here. Okay, let's see. I'll analyze the track. This is my gain area, so anywhere in there. I'm paying attention to the loudness here. So between 8 and 9, bring that up by another decibel or so. Bit more. I'm going to follow these as well. Touch more. Okay, that's fine for now. It's in the range. Let's listen to those resonances again now that we've got the volume up a bit. So pay attention to those two sounds in the mix. So that's with reso processing on and off. So the node position is related to the threshold here. So basically, no audio in this particular range. So it's a Q of 30 at 1869 hertz. No audio will surpass this. So it's basically notching out this frequency, but with a very thin Q. So it's very subtle. So I can position this vertically where I want to, where I want no audio to go above it. So the further down, the more processing I'll be introducing. So there's no processing, and then we bring it down. It's still very transparent, even down there, but you can see this is probably a good amount of reduction. I can either press the sweep button here or hold control and sweep around to find other frequencies that I don't like as well. So this is what it's removing. I want to be more subtle with some of these ones around the mids. You can hear how it just alleviates the mix of those harsh frequencies. Very nice, very nice. Reso saving the day again. Goodness, love that plugin. Okay, let's make some space for some more plugins now. So, all right, what's next? Okay, maybe we want to add a little bit of compression. So you can do compression before or after the EQ. Sometimes I do it before, sometimes I do it after. And let's see what a good setting would be. So we just want to tickle the signal. So this is too much right now. I'm going to put this distortion on soft because it adds some really nice punch. It's quite a cool feature of this compressor in Logic. So straight away we want to have the ratio around 1.4, definitely not more than 2. 1.4, 1.2 is okay. Let's go 1.4. We're going to have the threshold at a position where there's no more than 3 or 4 decibel reduction going on here. But we want the needle to return back to 0 each time. So let's try playing with the release. Because of the nature of this part of the track, it's not really returning to 0 very much. So I'm going to have to go for a lot less gain reduction. Sometimes you'll have a more transient track. It might even be at different parts of the track. You might get more returning to 0. Yep, so we're going for very little reduction here. Notice that it's increased the gain. That's this distortion here. So I'll bring the output down to match it. So this is just adding a little bit of dynamic control, very, very minor, but also adding a little bit of punch as well. We're not adding any gain, and we're making sure that we're making positive progress by level matching and then doing the bypass test. So by doing this, we avoid any kind of overcompression. An example of what overcompression might look like, if I just do it again here, might look like this, even if I take off the distortion element. So low ratio, where it's going like this. Sorry, low threshold, high ratio, and then we do the makeup gain. Notice the difference. So just those it's very powerful. You can very quickly destroy a mix like this. This is bad settings. Threshold too low, ratio too high. Trying to compensate by putting the makeup gain up, especially if the attack is really short. That's gonna suck the life out of the music. This is before. This is after. Yes, that will be a bad idea. So we'll use the previous settings. Now the whole time, what I really should be doing as well is making sure that the original track is in reference. I click mirror, and so I can jump back and forth seamlessly between them. So we can hear the difference that it's made already. Now, reference is very cleverly level matched it already, so it's added 6 decibels of gain here, so that it matches what's going on with the limiter and the compressor and the differences that Rezo has made as well. So I can really fairly compare and see the differences. Let's have a listen. This is how we've gone so far with just Rezo, the limiter, and the compressor. So it's not quite aligned, and that's going to be because we're adding lots new. What I'll do is I will add the rest of the plugins that we're going to use. So we'll use, let's use an imager as well. That'll be fun, something new. Let's use Mix Room, and we'll use Bass Room as well. We'll get those going so that the latency can be calculated, and we can do the track align. Okay, so now that I've done that, the best way to do the track line. So this track line is making sure that when you jump back and forth between your track and another track, they're perfectly aligned. So what I'll do is I'll just take the loop off. I'll go to the beginning of the track. I'll go track align, reset. Now it's calculating to try and line them up as perfectly as it can. Reset that and try again. Okay, we're there. Nice. So we've already made some positive progress just with Rezo and the compressor. Now let's have a look at the reference track, and we're going to try and dial in some nice stereo width. So what we're seeing here, we're seeing that in the reference track, it has a little bit more width in the low mids, whereas in our track, there's a bit more width up here. The high frequencies are fairly comparable. So what am I going to do? I'm probably going to bring in the frequencies around here. I might add a little bit of extra stereo width down here. I'm going to bring out the stereo width in the high end as well, because I think it's going to suit the track. So I'll do that like this. I'll add some bands in here. The first one, I'm just going to You can mono the low end or you don't need to. It's up to you. That thing, it just depends on your preferences. So we said we're going to bring in, I'm just going to add a little bit of width around, 100 to around 300. Touch of width. And then I'm going to actually reduce the width around 500. And then a bit of added width to the high frequencies. Let's see how that sounds compared to the original. Cool. I think that's a move in the right direction. So let's move on. Now let's get on to the tonal balance. So that's the main thing that we're missing now. So we've got the dynamics, the loudness are more or less in place. Resonances have been controlled. Stereo width is there. And now let's have a look at the tonal balance. So what I'm seeing is obviously the low end seems to be the biggest issue here. The order of mix room and bass room doesn't really matter. I tend to like to fix the bigger problems first. So I'm going to start with bass room. So what I'll do is I will find the reference track, which is here somewhere. There it is. And I'm going to bring it in to bass room and use that as a target. So we're going to go reference track in here. And I'm going to loop the whole thing because it's just one big loop anyway. And create targets. So now when I play my track, the targets will move into place. Okay. I'm just changing the scale there to 6. So just as reference had told me, bass room's telling me the same thing. We need to move these bands up so that we get a little more oomph. And it's something to bring this one down here. So let's match these up and see how it sounds, and we can tweak it from there. So we got this turned orange to show me I had to change the level here. Well, the difference is quite night and day there. That really brought in exactly what the track needed. So now let's compare it to the original mix and see how it's sounding. Lots of positive progress there, sounding really nice. So I think there's a little bit happening in the mids that I'm unsure about, and so I'm going to make these final little adjustments with mix room. So following the same process here, I'll open up the targets, I will bring in the reference track, loop it, same progress, create the targets, and play the song. Let it analyze, again making sure that we're analyzing the sonically the most dense part of the track, and we're going to click Add Smart Bands. So we immediately can follow this green line. So we want to match up what's happening on the sides here with mix room. So you might just need to tweak a few things, and let's see, double click to add another band if you need to, and then we can move them around. So that just feels like it's unveiled a blanket from the speakers or from the headphones, whatever you're listening on. Let's do another before and after test and just focus on those high frequencies. Really great. And so as for kind of, if you want to elevate the this process as well, now we can dive into mid-side specific boosting. So we've got a big boost here at the top, okay? Let's listen to the perfect mid-side setting for these top 3 bands to really kind of dial in what we really want to hear. So that's what we're listening to. That's kind of happening more in the sides. So if we focus on this band, we've got the hi-hats are kind of stereo. You've got the effects are very stereo, but the vocal is mono. So what do we want to boost more? Maybe the stereo sides. I like the boost in the mids as well, so I'm going to keep it. I'll keep it around 2.5, but have mostly in the sides. So we're boosting a little bit more in the sides and a little bit less in the mids. Okay, here I can hear there's a lot of information happening in the sides. I could potentially go for a heavier boost, but focus it more on the mids, and that will allow me to get a bit more brightness. So we've got master filters here. You can switch between master and mix. Master keeps the filters nice and clean, so giving you a very transparent result. Mix allows you to go above plus minus 4 decibels. So I think I'd prefer to actually keep this at the 4 decibels there and retain the transparency rather than switching the filters. So that's sounding nice. Again, focusing on the mid side here is important to make sure you're cutting exactly what you want to cut. So it might be beneficial here to focus more on the side channels to cut the mud rather than the mids. That keeps the body in place whilst cutting a bit more mud. Okay, so again, let's fire up reference. Let's see how we compare to the reference track and the original mix. So big improvements from the original mix. Let's compare that as well to the winners. They did a really great job, so I wouldn't be surprised if theirs is sounding better than mine. Let's see. I'll let you be the decider of which one you prefer. Anyway, I hope this process has been very helpful for you. One final thing we'll do is I'm going to export this, and we're going to have a look, and we're going to call it Tom's Master. Tom's Master. We're going to export this, and we are going to analyze it in Expose, and so we can make any final minor adjustments if needed. So let's see. Yeah, it's done. Bring it in. Bounces. Tom's Master. Open. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just on the edge of the loudness, so I'll want to bring that up. So how would I do that? I would go into the limiter. I'd bring it up by, let's say, 0.6. So we're going to go 8.6. That's that. So when I bounce that out again, it will be coming in at around minus 8.5. There's 0.6 difference. We can keep the true peak the same because that's already under control. And we look at Tom's Master versus the winner's master. So I actually have a lot less high end going on here than the winner. So perhaps I could look at the differences here, side, mid. Okay. So I could actually bring up my high frequencies by around, if I do it against these. So this is again comparing it to the reference track. So I'm looking at this here now. This is all okay within ±1, but it looks like my high frequencies are a little bit too low. So I'm going to try a boost at roughly 11,000 hertz by about 3 decibels. Let's see how that sounds. So I'm just going to fire up just to make it easy. I'm going to use Pro Q3. I'm going to go 11,000 hertz. And we're going to go 3 decibels. Keep the Q at 1. Let's hear how that sounds. Sounds pretty nice. I think it's brought my level line as well a little bit closer by doing that. Let's compare again. Sounding good. Okay, so that's part of the process. Trial and error, making some changes, testing it, seeing what's good, and working back to it. So anyway, I hope you found this process really helpful, really useful, and I hope that you can use some of these ideas moving forward in your own masters too. Thanks again for being part of this process. It's always super fun, and I love seeing what you guys are doing well, what can be improved upon, and just having a really open discussion about it all so we can all learn from the process. Thanks again, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Cheers.